Comanche29 here, another Topic of the Week video. Halloween month continues with another topic on video game adaptations. This week's topic was submitted by Rina093 on the Discord, and her topic is: what makes Netflix Castlevania actually succeed as a series despite being based on a video game? Well, a lot of things, actually. What makes Castlevania, the Netflix Castlevania show, so interesting is that it actually manages to take a story, one from an old NES game, and breathes new life into it. Now, this is kind of an important thing to talk about because Castlevania 3, the game that the Netflix Castlevania is based on, it's an old NES game, and those games, rather infamously, don't have a lot of story, which is mainly because of the hardware limitations at the time, and a lot of times they were just focused on making games. But a lot of games had these real bare-bones stories that had kind of a premise just to set up the game, and you kind of have that with Castlevania 3. Trevor Belmont is going to kill Dracula, and he meets a few people along the way, and then he kills Dracula. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, taking an old game from that time period and making a show or a movie out of it has caused some problems in the past. You look at stuff like the old Super Mario Brothers movie that no one wants to remember. And yeah, you see some people try to take a base concept and try to make a movie out of it, and they just kind of make something... Duh. There's so much potential to take this bare-bones story and make something interesting out of it. A lot of times people just fail at that. But we do see that even when they have basically a complete blueprint on how to make a story, like with the 2013 Tomb Raider game, they still screw it up because they don't really care. This is the opposite. The people involved with this, the people involved who are making the Netflix Castlevania show, they care. There aren't just references to the original game that it's based on. There are references to other parts of the series. You see a picture of Leon Belmont, which is from a game that came long after Castlevania 3, that acts as a prequel to Castlevania 3. You have aspects of other games like Curse of Darkness and Symphony of the Night brought into it. You can tell there's a lot of love for Castlevania in this show, and that is what makes it succeed. I've talked about this so much, and this is the core of a lot of these discussions on video game adaptations being bad, is people making these usually don't care. I talked about this in the last couple topics, and it's relevant here, because this is what happens when you have people who actually care about doing something good. What Netflix Castlevania does is it takes this bare-bones story, it takes these characters, and it invents an entirely new story. It does change stuff that is established in various different aspects of lore and canon, but it creates its own version of it, and this version is good. I mean, Sypha is changed as a character, but she's still fundamentally the same. They create an entirely new context for all these characters and how they meet. I mean, Sypha is still frozen, and Trevor still defeats a monster to save her, but the context is changed of how this happens, because this all happens, and even him meeting Alucard, this all happens before they go and fight Dracula. And speaking of Dracula, oh my gosh, they make Dracula so much more sympathetic. Like, you see him interacting with Lisa, and you see his pain and anguish when he finds out that she died. And then in Season 2, you can see that he's exhausted. He's tired of this war that he started, and he's got all these other vampires working with him, but he's just tired. And oh my gosh, his death scene, it's not some big climactic battle. Okay, there is a big fight with Dracula at the end. Of course there is. I mean, it'd be disappointing if there wasn't. But how he dies isn't from Trevor Belmont hitting him with a whip over and over. It's not him turning into a giant monster. It's actually a really quiet, somber scene where he's with Alucard and he realizes that he's killing his own son. The only thing left he has of his wife, their child. he's going to kill him, and he breaks down over it. After all the pain and anguish, and after all the murder and death, he's just a broken man. And that's when Alucard kills him, because Dracula had done so much evil. Like, it's something that really makes you... It gets to you, man. Like, man, I know so many people were crying at that. This really makes you care about Dracula. And in a lot of the games, Dracula's just a I'm evil villain. And it's like, this is such a different approach to him, and it's fascinating. I mean, it does make me question how they're going to incorporate Curse of Darkness. I'll talk about that a little bit later, but it's such an interesting take on Dracula here. Now, when you have a bare-bones story like what the old Castlevania games have, there's a lot you can do with this. You could come up with dozens of different variations of a story following the same basic premise, using the same cast of characters, and come up with a bunch of good ideas. I mean, shoot, a few years down the line, you could do another Castlevania show based on the same game and have it completely different, but still be good. There's so much potential with this, and it's actually great to see that a show is capturing that potential. This story had a vision. You can tell they had a story to tell. It's refreshing. It really is to see a show that is telling a story. Now, we've only gotten 2 seasons of the show so far, and I don't know how long the show is going to go. But it's covered the story of Trevor Belmont fighting Dracula, and it's actually looking like it's going to be moving towards incorporating stuff from the game Curse of Darkness, which is where Hector comes from. Now, Hector is brought in Season 2, which is actually interesting, because when you're introduced to Hector and Isaac, they're characters who, they're like, oh yeah, by the way, they existed back then, you just never saw them, you know. I mean, you can have explanations of it, well, this is why they never saw them, but I like how they're incorporated into this, because yeah, Dracula's trying to gather people to fight, so of course he gets his Devil Forge Masters. And they do a lot with Hector and Isaac, and I really love their story in this. I also really like how they play off of each other. Now, Isaac in Curse of Darkness has an, what's the word? Unfortunate design? I am absolutely delighted by his redesign. He looks so much better. I also really like how he plays off of Hector. They're opposites, not only in how they think, not only in how they act, but also how they look. There are contrasts drawn with them in almost every aspect of their characters and their design. And it's wonderful. And what's interesting is that they're in this season to set up their story in the next season. Now, Curse of Darkness has its own story that takes place after Trevor defeats Dracula. And the way that it's been happening in the show, it would necessitate a lot of changes. You can still actually do the same basic story, but it would just be really different. And I'm actually really interested to see how they're going to tackle this in Season 3. Or if they're actually going to get to this in Season 3. Season 2 ends with some cliffhangers, mainly revolving around Hector and Isaac and what they're going to be doing. Because, well, this seems like it could lead into some variation of Curse of Darkness, and I find that very interesting. Seeing how they approached writing the story for Castlevania 3, expanding it, giving it all this context, incorporating aspects from the various games, I'm interested to see what they do with Curse of Darkness. And they're setting up Isaac to be an antagonist in Season 3, along with Carmilla. So it's interesting to see how that's all going to play out. Another question people would have is, are they going to include Grant? Because Grant was in Castlevania 3 as one of the main team. Yeah, you had Trevor, Alucard, Sypha, and Grant, but Grant wasn't in the first 2 seasons. Interestingly enough, at the end of Season 2, we see a group of bandits, or what, they're douchebags, you know, and we see them attack Isaac. And then he turns them into monsters, which is exactly what happened to Grant. And then Grant was then turned back and then joined the team. So I'm wondering if that's how they're going to include Grant, if Grant's going to be one of those guys that we saw at the end of Season 2. Time will tell, and I'm actually rather excited for Season 3, because, wow, you're hinting at a lot of stuff incorporating Curse of Darkness. I'd like to see how they tackle this. Ultimately, two things come into play here to explain why the Netflix Castlevania is good. One, people care. I cannot underestimate this. People care. They care about Castlevania. They care about doing a good job. And they have provided us with 2 seasons of an excellent show. 2, you have people who are competent involved in this. Sounds kind of silly, but when you have incompetent people like Uwe Boll making crap, it's something you really come to appreciate. When you have people involved in the writing and animation and all that stuff, actually doing an excellent, amazing job. Like, the animation is great in the show. The writing is good. And all of this comes together to make a good package. Honestly, saying that it's good because the people involved in making it actually care is, well, kind of ridiculous. Because anyone making stuff, creative works, like shows, movies and stuff, should care. They should care about doing a good job, because this is their thing. This is their job. This is what they do. You don't go to a restaurant and have someone completely screw up your meals and then the chef just goes, well, I don't care. No, it's like, they should care, because it's their job. You would think that they would become writers and directors and movie makers and showrunners, etc., because they want to do this, not just make a quick buck. But all too often, you see people who just only care about making a quick buck, being in charge of this stuff. The Netflix Castlevania show is dripping with love for Castlevania, including the different aspects of the games, even including stuff from like Symphony of the Night. It's just, you have so much love for Castlevania in the show. You could probably do a drinking game with how many times I say love for Castlevania in this video. But it's true. When people are passionate about something, that passion can drive better products. Because when people care about something, they care about doing something good for it. I mean, effectively, this is like Castlevania fanfiction when you really think about it. But it's good fanfiction. Now, I do hope that the show continues to be good, because all too often I've gotten invested in shows only to be disappointed in them. Unfortunately, Voltron is in that category for a show that started off good and then tripped at the finish line and just exploded. I want Castlevania to finish strong. So yeah. I mean, this is far simpler because I'm not explaining why something is bad, I'm talking about why it's good. I had a lot to say about the Tomb Raider movie because, hoo boy. But this fills me with positive feelings because I enjoyed it so much. Then the Netflix show is actually what got me interested in Castlevania as a series. And if you want to learn more about the Castlevania series, I'd recommend you checking out a series of videos that I watched a while back after I started getting into Castlevanias by GamerThemeTV on YouTube. It's a whole timeline connecting all of the Castlevania games and going over the canon. I'll put a link to it in the description because it's actually a fun series to watch. And yeah, I think that's about it for this topic. If you want to submit a topic to me, you can comment below if you're on YouTube. If you're on Tumblr, send me an ask and put topic : then whatever topic you want me to talk about. Or if you're on the Discord, you can go to the topic submissions channel and then submit a topic to me there. Just make sure to follow the rules that I'll be posting down below. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check that out here when I get that done. So what are your thoughts on the Netflix Castlevania? Please comment below. And thank you for watching.